Thank you, Don, and thank you for being here tonight. I always look forward to coming here. I'm happy to be amongst my people, so thank you for joining us. Remember, you don't have to agree or accept anything I'm sharing. I'm just sharing from the heart, from the spirit, and wherever it goes, I trust it'll meet you exactly where you are. Donna was right about me and a mission. That is absolutely how I feel, how clear and committed I need to be truly helpful to all of humanity and to all of this planet. I shared recently that the other day when I was outside at the park where I like to go and exercise, I just looked up and I felt Jesus telling us with all urgency to don't waste time. Don't waste time, Gonzalo, replaying old guilts, old shames, old regrets, old doubts. Don't waste any more time. You are here for a divine purpose. You don't need to waste any more time. Come with me. Come with me. There was a sense of urgency I heard in his voice. And the thing is that what Donna was sharing about my mission is the same mission that we all share. It's not Gonzalo's special mission to be a light worker here on earth. It's the same mission that we all share, whether we realize it or not. Yes, we have different talents and different characteristics, but ultimately, the Holy Spirit and Jesus only wants to use all of the differences for the same objective, which is to wake us up. That is the only purpose that we have here. And for some, it takes longer than others, and that's okay. We have to learn as part of our journey to allow an allowance of others and our own differences is a huge part of really ingraining Jesus' forgiveness practice, because without allowance of others' experiences, without trying to change or judge or attack them, and without trying to judge or change or attack ourselves unkindly, we can't truly get past the behaviors and the appearances and all the stories that we've accumulated. We can't get past them unless we just allow them in the first place. If we start to get practice at allowance, at our own feelings and thoughts, all of them without condition, without judgment, and allow others' experiences without judgment and without attack and without condemnation, then we can truly get practice and get fluent at turning them over to the perfect light of God for true forgiveness, true healing, true letting go. I used to hear from the preachers all the time growing up about give it to God, give it to God. And I always thought as a kid, well, how do I do that? Is there like a manual? Is there like a step-by-step to walk me through my mind and my heart to give it to God? And I never got that. There was like this big blank space going to church. And I did enjoy going to some church services, but there was a blank space for me that was really hungry for more. I knew I was only getting a small part of what our purpose and our practice is here. So the manual really is to look up. The manual is to look up and to be completely submissive. I know we don't like that word here in our culture because we think it's some sort of weakness and being controlled, but that's what it takes. We have to lay down our stubborn, egoic insistence on trying to control things and control other people and control results and get the outcomes that we want and get the specific results that we want. We have to absolutely be practiced at laying that down so we can then submit fully to the Holy Spirit and Jesus' guidance for being led through every single challenge without condition. It takes a lot of willingness. It takes a lot of desire to be focused in on that mission, which Donna talked about, that we were all put here for. It takes a lot of willingness to fully lay down all of our learned ego insistence and just submit, to get down on our knees, if you want to say, and submit to the Holy Spirit and the Christ guidance for where to go, for what to do and what to say. In all instances, it takes a whole lot of willingness. I never realized how much willingness it took until I started doing the Course in Miracles and realized how much egoic junk and static and distortion that I haven't accumulated in my mind. It is immense the amount of static and distortion that we've accumulated year after year after year through all the institutions that we go through: family, culture, school, universities, religion, relationship, society, and of course now we have technology with all the images that we get downloaded with all day long at such an intensity. There's an immense amount of distortion that we have to work through, but we don't do it as an individual person, although we are individuals in our will. We do it as the Spirit. We submit to the power of Christ, the Spirit that's always with us, and to continually ask for guidance to work through the images and the distortions in our heads that then create this experience out here in the world, to either be reflecting fullness in our minds of spirit, or to either reflect a lot of malfunction and dysfunction in the world, which is what we see today as the norm for most humans' experiences. And on that point, I was talking to a good dear friend of mine yesterday, and we don't get to talk often, but we had a good conversation yesterday concerning just that type of distortion and pressure that we have to work through here as individuals on our journey. He's been with his current wife for about 10 years, and he was telling me that over the holidays they go see the wife's family in another town, and they spend the holiday there. In the last several years, because of the amount of conflict that he's experienced with the wife's family, in his experience, he feels they're very closed-minded, very closed off, just very set in their ways and not even wanting to entertain any other ways of thinking. And it was a very unpleasant experience to be around them. And he finally, God bless him, got to the point to tell his wife that he's not doing it anymore. He said, you can go spend the holidays with your family, but it is wearing out my soul, was his wording. It was a wear and tear to his soul to be around that family and not feel like there was much of an opening for the light to get in. And I thought to myself, God bless them that they were able to just be open and sincere and express with each other, hey, I'm not feeling inspired to do this, no matter how much tradition and how much habitual routine we've had as a family. I'm not feeling inspired to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this. This is what's in my best interest. This is what I'm aligned with, to not do something simply because of guilt or routine or expectation. And God bless them, they both had a very loving exchange, and it was accepted. And I thought, man, how few couples, how few relationships in general have that type of openness and loving acceptance to be able to allow, speaking of allowance, allow the other's journey. Allow the other's journey, even if it seems to lead them away from the other for a temporary time. It is such an immense amount of pressure to play along and to go along and to fulfill expectations that many times don't have anything to do with our God-given inspiration. And so I thought that was a wonderful example of, in common language, plain everyday language, how we can truly put to practice what the Holy Spirit is guiding us to do to help break down a lot of the distortion that the ego in the world has taught us is normal behavior that has not resulted in our genuine happiness and our genuine joy, if we're honest. So I needed to hear that, and that was really wonderful. And ultimately, back to mission and back to purpose, we all have our different talents and our characteristics, and we don't deny our differences in the world. Quite the opposite. We embrace our differences. And I think what we're seeing in the world now, with all of the intense hatred going on, intense personal vicious attacks, there's a very rigid non-allowance of others' experience, as well as the justification to attack a brother and sister for their differences and expressing their differences. Here in America, we say we love freedom, and we say we love to wave the flag of freedom, but we seem to have a problem when another brother and sister expresses freedom, that does not meet our version of freedom, and we justify attacking, viciously attacking, personal attacks because of the words being said. I'm not talking about cruel, vicious action or harm against another brother physically as much as words that express our differences, words that come before the physical attack. And there seems to be a deep-seated justification for attack on each other when we express these differences. And as long as we don't realize that that desire for attack in us ultimately ends up covering over the deep desire to attack ourselves. Jesus in the Course in Miracles says that unless you're willing to look at the full extent of our own self-hatred, pretty extreme language, our own self-hatred, we will never be willing to let it go. And so what happens in our world, in the ego identity world of differences, we gloss over our own self-hatred, our own inadequacies, our own insecurities, our own unworthiness that we've been chasing for our whole lives, seeking in the world, seeking validation, seeking approval. We gloss that over and then we project it out because this is what we do in the world. This is what we learn is justified here for some weird reason, but yet nobody's smiling, nobody's happy, ingraining this belief system of separation and justified attack because of that separation. So we really, getting back to mission and getting back to purpose that Donna talked about, we really want to make it our central focus in our mind training, in our spiritual practice, because they absolutely go together. We really want to make a central focus of asking to be led through all of our emotions and our thoughts, all of them, to not let any go unexamined in terms of embracing them all and taking responsibility for the thought passing through us. When we fight thoughts, which is what we were taught to do in this world, when we censor our thoughts in terms of judging them, judging and attacking ourselves before the judgment and the attack comes outwardly at somebody else, when we constantly judge and filter and censor and try to sift through all of the mounds and mounds of insane thoughts in our heads, then we keep ourselves in binds in a prison and we don't even realize how much of a prison we're in, as evidenced by the brother that I was sharing and the situation with his wife and the wife's family. There's such an imprisoning effect of these thoughts when we wrestle with them like that and we don't open up to divine expression to allow ourselves to walk through them. But if we don't realize that those thoughts that are attacking ourselves and justifying attack outward are coming from our mind, if we don't embrace them, there's no way that we can actually let them go. It sounds backwards to say, well, embrace all those judgments, simply the feeling. I'm talking about simply just embracing the feeling. If we embrace the feeling, it allows a movement through, it allows a flow of the Holy Spirit and the Christ to allow us to walk through them as opposed to fighting them, which we've gotten used to, as opposed to filtering through them and judging ourselves for, well, I shouldn't have these thoughts and so forth. And then we project that attack and hatred outward about they shouldn't have those thoughts. But we have those thoughts as well, if we're honest with ourselves. All the hatred we see out here in the world, we've had those thoughts and they're getting blown up on the world stage now. So the embracing of them is so important, just to allow the feeling to come through, for the Holy Spirit and the Christ to then lift them through and clean them from our minds. But our part is to be willing and responsible to do the very difficult work to look at those feelings and emotions with honesty, deep inner honesty, and say to the Holy Spirit and Jesus, walk me through, walk me through. On some level, I realize this is coming from my mind, walk me through. And that embracing of the feelings, of the experience of it, allows a release, a true deep release, not a hiding from, but a true deeper sincere release, because we're just allowing the mind to function in a way that it was programmed to function, and allowing our higher mind to walk us through to clarity, to peace, to joy, to our true state of mind, the Son of God, us does not function in a world where its thoughts controls him, her. The Son of God's natural state is not in a state of being controlled and being imprisoned by our thoughts that we're attempting to make sense of and mechanize and organize, and then it results in this dysfunction outwardly in the world. So I invite you to make as a purpose, as a focus, as a commitment to training your mind and your heart in being fully submitted with every single feeling and emotion that comes through, and embracing that experience to then be able to turn it over and ask for our higher power to lead us through the experience. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of commitment to clean up the junk that we've accumulated, but it can be done. It can be done. Many throughout time have done it, and they give us a wonderful example about the possibilities that God endowed us with. None of us is more special in God's eyes than the other, but we have to be willing to use that God-given power in our minds and hearts to clean out the darkness which the world and which the ego has justified in our minds. I want to leave you with two things that I wrote down because I thought they were so important to share every time I speak. I feel as part of that mission that we all share, we owe ourselves and we owe the world these two things as part of our daily practice. The first thing is self-compassion. We're pretty okay in the world when it comes to being compassionate to others. Pretty okay. We could get better at that, but we're pretty okay when it comes to being compassionate toward others. But we can't be truly compassionate, sincerely, genuinely, authentically compassionate if we're beating ourselves up and we're not allowing our own emotional and thought experience to just come through and embrace, like I talked about, and just to experience the human side of our passing through without judgment and attack on ourselves. So then that judgment and attack is tamed and doesn't go outward as viciously and as undisciplined in a way that we've seen in the world. So really, I invite you to make a point, a primary point in your daily mind training spiritual practice, to practice self-compassion. Embrace every single thought and feeling that comes through, no matter how ugly. Embrace it, because if we embrace it, we take responsibility for the source of it in our minds. And if we take responsibility for the source of it, we can more easily let it go to the presence of the Spirit of the Christ that is fueling us through this experience. It takes a lot of work, but it can be done. And the second thing is avoid being mindful of taking sides. Taking sides is part of this construct that says that we can justify attack on others because my identity, my firm, deep identification with a group, be it political, social, racial, national, you call it cultural, taking firm identification as your being rooted in that group really justifies attack on other brothers and sisters when we deem their experience as being somehow offensive. It's very sneaky because in our world of being individuals, we love taking sides. And I'm not talking about practical who you vote for and the team you root for. I'm not talking about that. That's the surface level stuff. I'm referring to a much deeper form of identification with groups and categories, to the point to where we think our well-being has to come at the expense of attacking another. It is very hidden. It is very, very sinister in its cover-up. But I ask you to be very mindful of this temptation in our world, this justification in our world to root our identity in groups. If we root our identity in groups of the world, and I mean our core identity, then we're taking ourselves out of the graces of God's oneness, the graces of God's light, which is unification, is wholeness. This is not denying or faking or pretending our individual human experience at all. denying or faking our human experience is not helpful. Nothing to do with denying our human experience. But what it is, it's taking the edge and the power off of the ego world's conditioning, which we've all been a part of. It's taking the edge and unplugging the intense justification for hatred that comes when we deeply identify a core creation in these groups. It's very sneaky because it's accepted in the world. Very, very sinister and sneaky because it's normal in the world to have our core soul identity in these groups and categories. But it in a very sneaky way, justifies hatred and separation on the outside. And that's what we see in the world. So I invite you to be very mindful in your spiritual practice about these two things, self-compassion and taking sides to the core. And in that practice lies our straight, narrow road to salvation. So I appreciate everybody for being here. I'm happy to be amongst my people. Acknowledge yourself for taking time to come